Hey, everybody, welcome back to Your Inside Track to Success. As always, I'm your host, Stewart Kraintz. We're back with you for another awesome episode that's here to provide you with the insights and wisdom to help you level up in your life, in your career, and in the goals that you have set out for yourself. Before I introduce this week's guest, friendly reminder, please like, subscribe, share this out with a friend. If you know anybody that might be interested in the content of this week's episode, please share it out. This is a free show after all. The cost of admission is just bringing another listener to the party. So, this is somebody this week, just to go ahead and dive right in, somebody that I've actually known for about the last 15 years, which is insane because I feel like it's gone by in the blink of an eye. But
Good.
going back to my days in the sports industry, this is somebody that has really blossomed in a career in sales within sports, but I like to think does it with his own personality, his own way of going about things, not just necessarily grinding through the sales calls each and every day. So he has experience in Major League Baseball, the NFL, and currently works for the NBA's Orlando Magic as the senior premium sales manager. Without further ado, I want to welcome Cooper Farrer to the show. Thank you for being here, man.
Thank you very much, Stu. And I actually wasn't sure of the exact number of years, but definitely appreciate the friendship. And that definitely brings us back to our time at the University of Oregon. So go Ducks.
Yes,
And
sir.
it's amazing how two gentlemen from the Bay Area found themselves in the Northwest, and now yourself in the Midwest and me in Florida. So, well traveled, well
Yeah.
traveled.
Yeah, dude, absolutely. And I think that's part of the beauty of life is just how, we're always writing the story of our lives, and we may think we know where the plot is leading, and we actually don't know until we get there. And so
Totally.
speaking of, I wanted to actually just kick it over to you.
Mhm.
You started out in the sports industry like a lot of people did at the University of Oregon in our class at the business school. What was it about a career within sports that spoke to you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great starting question. And I will say the University of Oregon, with their business school and their sports focus, they did do a great job to get a good understanding of what it meant and what it was like to quote unquote work in sports. I grew up playing sports, so I shouldn't say everybody, but those who grow up playing sports, you always have the ambition to, make it one day, and then ultimately as you grow up
Mm,
and the realities kick in that you probably got to adjust the route. For me personally, and maybe I was just young and naive at the time, but you know, exiting high school and going into college and just understanding that like I was already spending all my time, energy, and attention around sports. I wouldn't say the business of sports, but just like any fan does around sports. And when it came time to like kind of figure out my life and choose a career path, I was like, I'll put two and two together here. And the business opportunities that sports does provide, I would like to look further into. Specifically, I have chosen a pretty dedicated route to the sales industry. And I know we're
mm,
going to touch on that a little bit later. But full transparency, when I was in undergrad, I didn't even know that this type of opportunity or department existed within the sports world, just like many do, I'd say still do. A lot of sports teams can't just sell themselves. There's a
mm,
select few who do, and the predominant work done on the back end of any sports organization is how to generate revenue. And that wasn't much discussion in when you learn about different case studies in undergrad, but as you kind of live and breathe it in the front office of the organization, you understand like how important that constant, I would say, focus of generating revenue for a sports organization is. And I gravitated towards those directions. I would say first and foremost, just because of my personality, mindsets, I
mm.
would say skill sets. And we can dive on this a little bit further in the conversation too. But I had a background in retail sales,
Okay.
so combining retail sales, which working in retail was fun, I wasn't in love with it, but it was fun. And then working in sports, which I found to be more fun, figured I would just combine the two, and led me to sales and the career I have now. And I know you alluded to it earlier, but blessed to be a little bit over a decade in the sports world ever since we graduated college. And I haven't worked in anywhere else outside of that brief stint in retail, but it's kind of become all I know, which, I'm happy with.
Yeah, dude, I love that. And thank you for providing that type of context with your career and how you got to this point. Something that you spoke into that I'd love for you to just kind of elaborate on is the idea of pursuing your passion. So many of us grew up with the messaging of if you're doing something you love, you'll never work a day in your life or things like that. What is your take? And obviously you've been fortunate in that you've married something you're good at with something you're passionate about. But what's your take on pursuing the
Mhm.
thing you're passionate about versus pursuing the thing that's just going to make money?
Interestingly enough, I would say that this conversation in my head has changed. Ever since, your fresh job out of college and you're like, you're a gunslinger and you're willing to take on the world to, fast forward and obviously your priorities change. I would say the biggest thing to reflect back on, and I have these thoughts have gone through my head personally with when you're kind of getting ready for work, or if you get home from work that day, a good question to ask yourself is, would you do this job for free? If somebody,
Ooh.
and if your answer is yes, and if somebody, let's just say somebody were to pay all your utilities and pay all your grocery bills, and if someone were to feed you, clothe you, and house you, would you show up to this job at no cost? Like, do you like it that much? Do you enjoy it
Mhm.
that much? There's different components to that. Is it the people you work with? Is it where you work? Is it the access you're afforded? Is it the opportunities you're given? Is it the influence you have? Those sort of things are, and if the answer is kind of yes, or if it's definitely not a hard no, you're probably in a position where you found yourself in a good place. So I think everybody's answer to that is obviously going to be different based on their priorities and what their passions are. Things that stuck out to me when I was, especially early on in the career, when I was doing this job, things that stick out. I understand that everyone works in sports, but the very cool concepts of it are, I have access to this arena, to this stadium. I
Mhm.
can go behind the scenes with this badge. Is that worth waking up for every day? Yes or no, you decide. I'm able to get a little more exposure to the team and the players on certain levels. Is that worth, coming to? Yes or no? I get to engage with season ticket holders every day. And honestly, am I in a good spot because the product I sell is almost like fun and coming to a ballpark with their family or their clients? And yes, it's going to be a grind, but when you kind of push through the layers of a sale, you ultimately are asking them to come out to what could be like the best day of their lives potentially. There is that
Yeah.
potential, and you're not selling like a different product that could be, I don't want to talk down on anything. It's not like you're a good example is like you're not like you're selling copiers, or you're not like
Sure.
you're doing like no offense to anybody selling copiers, but you're the concepts of what you're doing are under the entertainment and like fun umbrella, and it's a
Mhm.
full-time job, and it has all the same components as a sale that anybody would. But interesting to note where I've found myself to be very, very blessed and fortunate working on the sales side of things. I have been able to kind of combine the two things that you just mentioned, working for your passion and making money. And I know
Mhm.
that, if the podcast and what we're talking about, if the listeners are very sales driven, I I do think that that is an absolute blessing that the industry affords. And you not only from the components of controlling your own paycheck, but like that attitude, energy, and effort that you put into your job. Not only can you love what you do and have a passion for it, that's like kind of the emotion of a sale in general. And if you find yourself doing that well enough, it's going to replicate into paying,
Mhm.
whether it's your finances are increasing, or any amount. One thing I tell our reps pretty often, especially our newer ones, is the the component of a sale is just the transfer of enthusiasm from one person to the other. And
Ooh,
if you can be
speaking to that some more.
yeah, so if you can be enthusiastic about, I mean, I'll just take it from sales again. It doesn't have to be, but in whatever you're doing, let's just talk about sales. If you can be enthusiastic about what you're doing, that's going to show, and a easy example, I mean, easy thing to talk about would be like most people are enthusiastic about their passions. And
Mhm.
what kind of gets me sometimes is like people are always like, oh, I can never be in sales. It's like, well, maybe you wouldn't be in like sports season ticket sales. I get that. But like, I don't know, if you love jogging with your dog or something, you could probably coincide that to be enthusiastic enough to talk about it. And if you somehow learned that that could generate a sale for you and increase your income, you would probably be pretty good at it. I don't have a dog. I like to run, but like I'm not doing that, so I can't really be enthusiastic about jogging with my dog. But you just substitute that with anything that you feel like.
Mhm.
Does not mean you have to get into the sales world. I understand that. But back to like kind of what I was saying with like our reps, because our inside sales program is a pretty constant place where we have new, young, energetic
Yep.
members in our organization. And if they can, in sales, you deal with a lot of rejection. We all know that. And that starts to add up and get tough. But if you can be enthusiastic about what you're doing, that transfer of energy is gonna play off, and it's gonna come off to how you sound. It's gonna come off to your customer. It's gonna come off to in your pitch and your recommendation,
Mhm.
and like ultimately doing your job well enough, and even just having that enthusiasm. Like it's not so much more like a sale as more of like a conversation and
Yeah.
finding the product. So I would say that the sales opportunity does give you the sales positions do give you opportunities to combine that working for your passion and potentially paying well. I would say if you're
Yep.
maybe looking outside of the sales industry, I'm a big, 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 big believer. And if you're doing what you love, whether it's a higher power, some call it God, whatever the case is, or just life, it has a way of blessing you to put the right people in your life. So like, ultimately if you start doing your passion, it's not going to happen the next day or week 1 or week 2, but like if you stick to doing what you like and you wake up every day, with that energy to do what you love, the right people are going to come through. The
Yes.
right opportunity is going to show up. Somebody's going to
Yes.
make a recommendation that you probably didn't have previously, and it's going to come
Yes.
it's going to come organically. So as
Mhm.
opposed to being like, oh, I'm in this job because it pays me well, and like in all honesty, does it actually
Yeah.
pay well? Like what is pay well? Is it paying you $1 million a year and you hate it? Maybe different question, but like, if it's paying you well and you're getting by, we live in 2023. There's so many ways to like earn an income. You might as well start with what you like. So
Yeah, dude. Thank you so much. That was such an amazing answer. And folks, for those of you listening at home, I sincerely hope that if you weren't taking notes, you pause, rewind that entire section and go back through it again because Cooper is dropping knowledge. Like, yes, he is somebody that probably was more well equipped than others to go into a career of sales just in terms of like natural personality, a hunger for it, a drive. But to the point he made, like it's often just about finding the thing that you're passionate about and willing to get others as excited about as well. And part of the reason, Cooper, that I wanted to have you on this show is because the folks that listen are people with dreams, are people with goals. And whether we're selling a product or a service or an idea, people that are up to big things are inherently going to have to sell something to somebody at some point. And so I appreciate you speaking into this as eloquently as you did.
One thing to that, Stu, even every entrepreneur out there, everybody starting their own business or having their own ideas, the toughest thing you're going to have to do is sell yourself.
Mhm.
So, you might not want to sell a product for somebody else, and I get that, but if you're thinking of going out on your own, like the ultimately you have to transfer that enthusiasm that you
Yeah.
have to somebody else to like be as enthusiastic as you are with your idea. And look at anybody who started anything big, like Elon Musk. Like, love him or hate him, he was very enthusiastic about his product, and enough people
Mhm.
received that energy that they loved it too. One thing that actually just came to mind for anybody
Sure.
listening or yourself, sports quote. The Mike Ditka was a NFL football player. He's in the Hall of Fame. His Hall of Fame speech, I heard it one day, and one of his lines is something that I wrote out. I just copied it and had it on my wall, like in my closet, when I got ready every day. And it was in quotes: "Is excellence in life is when you recognize an opportunity and pursue that opportunity with passion." And if it can come from a gentleman who's in the Hall of Fame of the NFL and like a legendary football coach, it almost boils down to be that simple. You recognize
Mhm.
an opportunity and you pursue that opportunity with your full passion. And like in his example, he recognized an opportunity to play in the NFL. He loved that opportunity, did it with his full passion, and ultimately now he's in the Hall of Fame. So like imagine if you just do that with your career or your wife or your husband or or
Mhm.
your kids or your spouse or or your hobbies. And it's just like, it almost boils down to that simple. Takes a long time to do, and you got to be consistent. But got that gentleman to the Hall of Fame,
Yeah.
probably work for a lot of people.
Yeah, and maybe some people bristle at the idea of calling things like interpersonal relationship sales, but at
Yeah.
the end of the day, y'all, developing a relationship, whether it's a romantic one, a professional one, or even just a friendship, you are in essence selling yourself to the other person at all times. Like, this is what I'm about. These are the things I'm interested in. Does this align with you? Is this something we could pursue together? And, like I got to sell Cooper on the idea of being a guest on this show, like full disclosure. And he was kind enough to say yes. So, in essence, I
Absolutely.
closed the sale, but that actually does go into my next question I wanted to ask you is the importance of interpersonal relationships.
Mhm.
There's a lot of quotes out there about how nothing great was ever built alone. Obviously, the Orlando Magic, your employer, were not started by just one guy.
Mhm.
And wondering if you can speak into the importance of relationship in your life and why it matters to always create relationships and develop them for ourselves.
So yeah, to that, and I know you and I have connected offline about this, and it's very true. But the proverbial, you are a, you're you're the combination of the five people that you spend the most time with or surround yourself with, and it might not even be five. It could be two, one, but
Mhm.
around that number. And I take it with a grain of salt. I wouldn't say that I spend like, especially growing up in the Bay Area, like you and I have, and now I find myself in Florida. Yes, I have been here for a number of about 5 years, 6 years. But born and raised, life, everything is California based. I would say I probably bucket it into like segments of like those I spend my time with from a career perspective and work related. Those I spend my time with, I would say, maybe more interpersonally, where it's more like life focused per se. And then, you know this, but I just went back to get my master's. I'm getting my MBA at University of Central Florida. And so, so of course there's now people that I spend more time like institutionally with, where, all of those buckets, the conversations are obviously different. Something I'm talking about with school, I'm probably not talking about with work. But
Sure.
who do I surround myself with in those fashions? And even take it a step forward, there's also my buddies that all we do is watch sports together. and we're probably
Right.
not talking about sales. Potentially we're talking about like, career stuff maybe, but like, you also got to have those escapes. But definitely a big believer in that of who you spend your most time around. And I think that's also led me to why I've gotten probably more involved with, if the people aren't immediately like within walking distance or driving distance of your proximity, that's where you can look outside of like your circle of influence right now. And if you look around and you don't have it let's say you don't have it at work, or you don't have it at home, or or in your neighborhood, let's say, that's where like those programs exist that I have been involved in, and you and I have connected on this as well, like the Tony Robbins and the coaching and the
Mhm.
mentorship. And me and my now wife, we just went to a Brandon Bouchard event in Austin, Texas, Growth Day, where those things will stand out for me a little bit more, where it develops those interpersonal relationships, but how you can use, kind of like outside influences, you know, with people who aren't right next to you, at those sort of events. And one one big thing that stands out to me is there's a saying by Tony Robbins. He says it a lot, where proximity is power. And
Mhm.
I'm a big believer in that. And it doesn't, I know I just mentioned like having, if it's not right where you are, proximity, go find it. But
Mhm.
it could also even be like, how close are those influential people to you? If you were to, if you were to call them, would they pick up? If you were to text them, would they text back? If you wanted to, if you reached out to say, hey, can I call you? Can we set up a time to chat? Would they, at least find that time for you? And if you look around and you do have that, stick to those people who are making a positive influence on you. If you look around and you don't have that, that would probably be like step number one right
Yeah.
now to better yourself. And I'm happy to dive more into like how I've used like mentors, or develop some of those relationships as well.
Yeah. So, who are maybe the one or two most influential people that have served as mentors in your life, and how have you worked with them and developed those relationships?
I would say one of the things that has blessed me the most, and why I enjoy being in the industry I'm in, is I have been very fortunate in especially early on in my career, to be around like really, really, really strong leaders and
Mhm.
good people. So I've been able to like, play off of that. And yes, we probably had stronger relationships when I was there in the same building working with them or for them. But how like a lot of what they taught me early on has influenced what I do now. Number one, being a very close mentor of mine, his name's Jared Dillon, and he heads up the operations for the Orlando City soccer team here in town. He I've gotten to know him over a number of years. Actually, interestingly enough, Stu, he's a Oregon Duck alumni. He was
Let's
there,
go.
the Duck, prior to us, but we really connected because the path of travel, I guess I'll call it, was fairly similar. From the Bay, he's from the Bay Area. He went to University of Oregon, and then after Oregon, he has had a career in the sports industry, where he has definitely made a really great name for himself. Where Jared Dillon would definitely be one of them, and then Justin Peckus is another mentor of mine who is still at the Sacramento Kings, and I worked underneath him at my time with the Sacramento Kings, where I was previously to here, where I would say too, a lot of what stands out with those two gentlemen is I was able to connect with them early in my career, which I guess just like anything that you're doing, imagine like a kid growing up, you can, those influences on how you get molded and shaped can be a little bit more ingrained than, if it were to be later. And the only thing I think would be different is like me being stuck in my own ways and not
Mhm.
being as, willing to receive. Not to say anybody can't make that happen today, no matter where they are in their life or career. That's not what I'm saying, but I guess I'm saying I'm fortunate that the conversations and the communication, the connections did happen early on. And whether it was as minuscule as like sales tactics and like next steps in like a sales process, all the way to like, job promotion and career growth and trajectory. And, where I find myself now in Orlando, Florida, there was a lot of conversations and feedback I went to get and gathered to try to make the best decision. So they've helped out tremendously there. And then, of course, finding as much time as possible to still stay, in communication and connection to them. Very fortunate, both of them wrote me letters of recommendations for my MBA program that were needed. So,
Yeah.
that's where a lot of those, interpersonal, relationships can then unfold like outside of like career related or work related. And it's like, okay, MBA is more life related. Yes, it's related. You do it because it's in the business world. You try to get a job, but like, you don't dedicate all that time outside of work and life, if it's not going to be life related too. Big thing I would put out there for anybody who's maybe looking to get maybe more involved with like a better circle of influence or even mentorships is I heard this quote, a guy of quotes. So I got another
Yes,
one for
sir.
you is, I do forget where I heard this, so I'm not gonna take credit for it. Is like mentorship is like a vending machine where you have to be the one to go and get it if you're hungry.
Wow.
So with that is, never in the history of vending machines has a vending machine ever gone to the person to feed them. If you can kind
Sure.
of pick up that funny analogy and, the process, the meaning of it just comes down to like, you have to be, active with it. You have to be intentional with it. You have to be consistent with it. And like, no, like, yes, not every person you reach out to is going to be free because you reached out to them and said, hey, can we talk? They might not be free for like a month, 2 months, 6 months, um, but it does make a difference if you're willing to, you know, have the tenacity to keep with it. So I've always kind of
Yeah.
figured it, like that. And whether it's somebody else trying to look out for themselves or, start to reach out, I would say start the process now.
Yeah. So I have a piggyback question for that. So one of the theories that I have ascribed to for a very long time is that go givers receive more versus go getters, so to speak. And I have always believed in the philosophy that when reaching out to somebody, when making an ask, whether it's mentorship or to appear on a podcast or any type of thing that I am theoretically looking to ask for the person's assistance in, I always try to give value first. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how can I make this person's time worth it to pour into me? What can I offer them in return that's going to further them? I'm
Totally.
wondering if that's a approach you've taken, or how have you successfully gone out and creating mentors and surrounding yourself?
My honest answer to that is I would say like I probably don't do the best job of being like, here's what I can offer you. And I wouldn't say I have any good examples of setting up that way. But what I will say, and if somebody like let's say you're trying to reach out and you don't have anything to like offer, where I think you can kind of coincide that is when that person is willing and able to give you the time, the time of day, the energy, their conversation, um you have to be very, 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 very thorough and thoughtful and intentional with what you want out of that conversation.
Mm,
And they are there for you, and it's not on them to like come up with a game plan for that conversation. In my opinion, if you were to reach out and be very intentional about like what you're looking to do and why, and I'll give you some examples in a second, most people are willing to like give you that time to, because it's also like it's also like a testament to them that you see them as
sure.
a good person to reach out to for advice, for ideas, for next steps. And, even if it's as simple as like, hey, I'm looking to get into this industry. I see you work in it, like, would you be okay if I asked you a couple questions of like best route to go? Like I don't have anything to offer you at that time outside of like, can you help me? But if if that person were to say yes to that conversation, a big thing where I see people fall on their face, and the reason I use that example, I get reached out to a lot on LinkedIn where people want to work in sports.
Sure.
And a lot of the times not every one of them knows what that means or what the
Right.
expectations are or what I do in my role and how I can help them. And there is a big, big, big difference where I feel value in the conversation, where I'm not receiving anything besides they're asking me questions and I'm happy to answer them. But there's a big difference if they kind of already have a foundation for that and they understand, like, hey, Cooper has a background in sales. I want to get into sports. I understand, like, it's going to be in the sales route. What were some things that I can do to help me stand out to hopefully land that first job in sales?
Yeah.
That's a great way to go. Bad is like reaching out to me. And then their questions are along the lines of like being involved with drafting the players.
Oh, woof.
Bad, bad route to go. And that's where those conversations will be shorter. And that's where those conversations might only happen once. More often than likely they will. So, like, again, doesn't mean you care to work in sports, but if you're setting up that time with that person, make sure they walk away from that conversation being like, wow, that guy or that girl knows what they're talking about and they have a direction they want to go in. And hopefully I help them in that direction a little bit better versus showing up and being like, yeah, like, like I just wanted to have a conversation and see what I can do to get a job. And they're like, look on LinkedIn or something, go to
Yeah.
Indeed, so hopefully that's a takeaway that somebody could start doing today.
Yeah, absolutely. And one last thing that I want to contribute to that, when I was at the New York Yankees, I would similarly get hit up all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And y'all, if you are reaching out, you owe it to the person that you're reaching out to, if they do help you, to at least thank them for their time.
Yeah,
And
totally.
especially if they give you more than just a boilerplate answer. I can't tell you how many times back when I was in sports sales, people would reach out just as Cooper described, and I'd give them my answer. I'd write out a well thought out email and I would never hear from them again. I wouldn't
Yeah.
even get the LinkedIn request to link up with them.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and all those things matter. And I guess I can just recap it with, I'll like tie with a bow with this is the value of that, especially when you kind of, if you're trying to connect with folks who you establish as like at a higher level than you, which I would hope is the direction everyone's trying to go. One of the biggest values they're going to allow you to do is they're going to, they might have been in the industry, 8, 10, 12, 20 years, and you're reaching
Mhm.
out to them for some expertise. Usually their direction and their answers are going to help you bypass a lot of the things that they encountered along the way that might have frustrated them, that might have stressed them out. They're looking back on it, they're like, wow, I would have done it a different way. And here is somebody asking me, how they can do it a different way too. So like they're helping, they might be at stage 10 and you're at stage 1. They can probably help you get to stage 4 in half the time it took them. So like just like that, that express route to success, it lives with somebody who has the knowledge. So are you finding that?
Yeah. And are you implementing it, is what I'm hearing you say as well.
Totally. Yeah. No, that's even another, that could be podcast number 2 is, you can't just sit on your hands when someone offers anything.
Yeah. 100%, man. Oh, man. So good. I wish we had another hour. I mean, this has been so great. I'm actually pumped up having this conversation with you. So I
Yeah.
know it's a good one, and I'm sure the listeners are going to feel the same way. I want to make sure that we honor your time here. So, one of the things I just wanted to ask is, if you could have started it all over again, what is the one thing you would have done differently or done earlier in kicking off your career?
Yeah. Great question. I would, so I'm very happy and I'm very fortunate in like the routes that I've chosen, and I'm here today because I took those routes. And obviously you can't change anything of the past, but more so on the lines of, in early on in my career, I I probably would have wished I had a better understanding of what the other avenues would offer should I have made a pivot into
Hmm.
something like leadership, something into like a different type of, I would say, different type of product sales and things along those lines where, you know, I bounced around a couple of times between teams, and like in my eyes, it was always like for a promotion, better job, different opportunity that I was looking for. So all the moves have been, intentional and positive, nothing bad there. But I would say if I were to look back on it, I probably wish I took more time to understand like the nuances of other roles that I could have been involved in, and
Sure.
then really, really, really get a better idea for what those roles lead to in the future.
Mm.
So it's like, okay, you have this track record and you can go this route, and this is most likely where it goes, where most often where it leads to, like, do you like that end result? Yes or no? So it's like, okay, is it a different team? Is it a different, is it a it could even be like a different concept of the business. Maybe it's not team, maybe it's agency.
Hmm.
Maybe it's not sales, maybe it's leadership, maybe it's not ticket sales, maybe it's sponsorship. And I would say, I probably just kind of kept my head down and did my job to my fullest abilities, and it's allowed me a lot of opportunities. Don't get me wrong, but if you're talking about early on in the career, I would have I would have hoped that was made a little more obvious.
For sure. Got it. Yeah, and folks, I know that this has been a very packed episode in terms of the nuggets, the takeaways, the ideas. And so definitely do yourself the service, hit the rewind button or scroll back and listen to some of these sections again cuz like I said, Cooper just dropped a lot of knowledge and a lot of really sound advice, not only in sales but in relationships and also overall career growth as well. And folks, I want to remind you to please hit like and subscribe. Again, please share this with somebody if you got any value, which I know you did today. And also in the comments below, please let us know what your number one takeaways were. Let Cooper know so that he can continue to interact with you as well. And Cooper, before we head on out of here, what are the best places for people to connect with you to continue the conversation offline?
Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn's going to be by far the best. I'm not on really any other social media, but you can find me at, it's actually my first name is in parentheses, it's William and then Cooper Ferrer, but I'm on it fairly constantly. So any connection request or inbox message, happy to further the conversation there.
Awesome. And folks, we will make sure that we have his LinkedIn information linked in the notes section below so you can connect with him. So, Cooper, I want to thank you for being on today. We got one final question for you. We ask it of all the guests, and that is, what are you acknowledging yourself for today?
The best acknowledgement I can make at this exact point in time is my happiness with my recent marriage.
Let's
So,
go.
yeah, there we go. So, I know we didn't touch, mostly career related stuff, but just got married about a month ago from today on August 25th, 2023. So, definitely like to acknowledge my wife.
Awesome. And congratulations again. I'm just really on a personal note want to thank you again for being on, but I just want to acknowledge you for how much growth I've seen in you over, the decade and a half we've known each other, going all the way back to the business school at University of Oregon and just seeing you where you're at today, man. It's truly a blessing and a testament to, being committed to goals and dreams and going for it. So thank
Thank
you
you
for
very
being
much,
on the
Stu.
show.
And you as well. Congrats on getting everything kicked off here. It takes a lot of, I'll put it this way. I know we've kind of said, a lot of analogies here, but especially what you're doing takes the most energy to get a rocket ship off the ground. You know, you gotta rev those engines and, blast off. But once it's up in the air, hopefully it's some smooth sailing. But definitely appreciate you for the invitation today. Doing a great job, great host, great questions. And yeah, look forward to continuing the conversation.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. And folks, again, this has been your Inside Track to Success. I'm your host, Stewart Kraintz. We will see you next week.